What's going on, everybody that's tuning in live? Right now we have some reverb on the mic, but we're going to get that taken care of for you guys real quick. My name is Ahman Allah.
And I'm Yashamai.
And tonight we are going to be going over a lesson in the history of our people titled Early Israelite History in the Americas. And I'm going to try to keep this as I guess, interesting as possible. I want it to be more so of an oratory and of a storytelling type vibe. But, of course, we got to go through the knowledge and the facts and the history and the scriptures as well. So let's start with this. Early Israelite settlements in the Americas. So this is dealing with those, as the scriptures mention, we're going to get to those, the 10 tribes of Israel, when they were dwelling in America, when they left the land, for reasons that we'll get into later, before what's called in the terminology pre-Columbian times, before the white man, before Esau, before Edomites came over here and pretty much did what the Most High allowed them to do, but interfered with our native Israelite brothers that were dwelling from the Arctic of North America, throughout all the plains of North America, down into Central America, and even all the way into South America, from the west to the east coast of that. So we're gonna get that started with in the book of 2 Kings, and I believe we're gonna get chapter 17. If not, I'll recorrect you. 2 Kings 17, and let me see if it's 22. Yes, sir. Okay, so the book is 2 Kings chapter 17, and you can do 22 and 23.
2 Kings chapter 17, verse 22. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them.
So the children of Israel that is mentioned is talking about, at this point in time, it's talking about the northern half of the kingdom of Israel as a whole. Before then, in some history lessons that we actually covered, we understood that the kingdom of Israel as a whole got divided in two. And we call it the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Israel was the name or the title that the Most High respectively gives in our King James Version for the northern kingdom of Israel. And Judah, or the southern kingdom, was the other respected name, the Jews, for the southern kingdom of Israel. So now again, we're dealing with the northern kingdom. Read verse 23.
Until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants, the prophets, so was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day.
So at this point in 2 Kings 17 and 23, the northern kingdom had been progressively being taken out of the homeland, the motherland of Israel, over a period of time. By the time this happened, all of them were completely, as far as a mass majority, all of the northern kingdom of Israel were completely removed by the Assyrian Empire at this time. And they were relocated in Assyria as far as places like Media and Persia. And that's really, really close to pretty much in what we would call today, that's really close to India. So that's how far removed that the northern kingdom Israelite brothers were removed at this time. So now we're going to get to exactly between this time period and then some more details. So we get to 2nd Esdras chapter 13. And if we can get switched to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to edify a little more too.
You said 2nd Esdras 13?
Yep, and verse 40. You can hold on from that. So, yeah, that's the title of the lesson. So, the time period since the expulsions, which we just talked about right now, this was from the expulsion of the northern kingdom until, 1500 AD was when the end of pre-Columbian times existed. So this was a period of about 2,200 years of these 10 tribes being known in the world as the lost tribes of Israel. So Now, we're going to get to 2nd Esdras 13:40 and through 45.
The book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 13, verse 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land.
That's what we just read right now as confirmation in the book of 2nd Kings. You can switch the PowerPoint back to us right now. You can switch it back to us, Angel. So that's what the book of 2nd Esdras just confirmed right now, and Ezra's prophecy or vision rather, it goes in even deeper, which is where we're going to begin the main course of our lesson. Continue reading.
But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt.
So at this point in time, sometime after 700 BC, and I say that circa 700 BC because the estimated time was, I believe, 722 was when the northern kingdom got completely taken out of the land. So I just estimate circa 700 BC. So between then and within probably 100 years or so, 102 years or so, a mass majority of those northern kingdom Israelites decided that, you know what? We're kind of feeling a little regretful. We're going to leave completely the known world, which for us dwelling in the Western Hemisphere would be the Eastern Hemisphere. And they decided that we're going to get out of here out of a specific route, and we're going to go somewhere else. Continue reading.
Verse 42, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river.
Got you. So that was the intent and the idea, that we might keep the statutes of the Most High God that we have been continuously breaking in the Northern Kingdom history during the split. They were going to try to attempt to keep what they knew over in the Americas, which is we're going to find out right now as we continue reading 2nd Esdras.
Come on. Verse 43, and they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth.
So with that name, a year and a half journey, we understand that the Euphrates River, if I can bring out my atlas really quick for you guys. Give me one moment to show you guys. Here we go. Somewhat. All right, right here. If you can see right here, the Euphrates River is, thank you, AV. The Euphrates River is right here going along where you see Mesopotamia, and is going into this great portion right here, which is, I believe, it's the Red Sea. From the Red Sea, that leaves an entrance, if you look onto another world map, into the Indian Ocean. And from the Indian Ocean, traveling from there, that's good, thank you, appreciate that. And from the Euphrates rivers to the Red Sea, into the Indian Ocean, Israel, the 10 tribes of Israel, were able to circumnavigate under and across, for the most part, under and across Africa, and make their way east into northern, central, and South America. And this was a journey that took about, and as the scriptures say, a year and a half's time. So you have to factor in, breaks and stuff like that, as far as, taking landmass breaks, because you can't assume that anybody would be on the seas for a year and a half just on a boat. You have to kind of dock sometimes. So that's why it took time. And there's a number of places, maybe this is for a lesson for another time, that Israel possibly may have docked to, and just by the routes that we do know and teach, where they did dock at to make that 1.5-year journey. Let's see. Do we need to speak any more? No, actually, no, that's good. So, matter of fact, read verse 45 again.
Verse 45, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years, and the same region is called Arsareth.
Okay, so this country, Arsareth. When you look up in the Jewish encyclopedia, they have a really good definition of what this Arsareth is, and it's pretty much a land that was hidden away and kept away. That's the general basis of what Arsareth is explained in the Jewish encyclopedia. But I wanted you guys another example. So there's a lot of people that may not subscribe. Not that we tell you to do that. They may not subscribe with the Apocrypha because maybe it was outside of the scriptures. Well, the scriptures that you have between the Old and New Testament say pretty much the exact same thing. If we can get to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 23 and verse 8. As a matter of fact, read from verse 7.
The book of Jeremiah, chapter 23 and verse 7. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that they shall no more say, the Lord liveth, which brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country, and from all countries whither I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land.
So this is another prophecy that Jeremiah made that coincides with the same one that ESDRAS gave. Now the key thing is to understand what this word right here is the north country. Now I've heard a couple people just in my time in the truth in Israel that say the north country is North America, which it is, but they don't really explain that very well. They just associate, I think, the word north with North America. But when you actually look into the details of what the English King James translation of what north means, you'll actually get a better idea of what it's actually saying. So the word north, if you look it up in the concordance, it's the word it's the concordance number H6828. And I don't have the exact Hebrew word, but I have the definition. The word for north is replaced to mean hidden, or darkened, obscure. So when you kind of put those two things together, that they shall no more say, the Lord liveth, which brought out the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country. It's talking about the hidden country. Now, North America, Central America, South America, these countries were specifically stored away and hidden from the then known world of the Eastern Hemisphere from everybody else. Other than the fact that Solomon did know that that land was over here because he actually sent ships, and we're going to actually prove through some more scriptures that he sent ships to Ophir, and there's a lot of evidence saying that Ophir actually was in Peru. But that's the definition in Jeremiah 23 that just proves that there was a hidden country that our people would be gathered and taken from. So a hidden country is something that you cannot get to easily if you're living over in the eastern portion of the world. You can easily get to by land from Israel into Africa, into Asia, and into Europe. So this hidden country has to be speaking of, in the book of Jeremiah, North, Central, and South America. So now, now that that's actually been said, let's get to some of the things, some of the settlements actually of our people in the Americas. If we can switch back to the PowerPoint. Okay, check that out. So between 700 BC and 15 AD is the time we're going over. So let's first go over some of the stuff our people were doing in North America. So North America includes all this landmass to where you find Native Americans, which are Israelites, dwelling and doing what they were doing, again, trying to keep at their best what they knew the commandments of the Most High from what they remembered since being exiled way back in 700 BC. Now, as a quick before, because I'm going to go by each section of America kind of one by one, but I'm going to keep driving the point. Some tribes knew more of the law than other tribes. You can't assume that every single tribe of Indians in America, even though they're all Israelites, you cannot assume that they were all keeping these same laws. Some were doing some, and some were doing others, but they all, as a total, try keeping the law to the best of their abilities. So now we're dealing with, we're going to deal with North America. So that includes, everything you see here. Now, one of the most notable mentions that we're going to mention in North America is these actual cities. We have the cities of Cahokia and Mesa Verde and Chacao. Now I'm going to go back to the map. Cahokia is actually located within the Mississippi River Basin. So that's what you see over here, the southeast and the northeast portion of America. And what happened was, if you guys study a lot of Native American history, not much is really spoken of, at least over here in Los Angeles, not much is too much spoken of as far as cityscapes that North American Indians built. And I'm talking about who today might identify as the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, Navajo, those Native Americans. They actually had a major hub, and that city was called, one of those cities was rather called Cahokia. And one of the things, and this is going to be something that's actually a commonality point, they had pyramids there. They may not have the type of pyramids that you might see in Egypt, whereas, built out of stone, but what they had, they called them mounds. And they have another name that they called our brothers over there. They called them the mound builders. But nonetheless, they built pyramids and they built cities around those pyramids. So this is another misconception about Native Americans that you have to understand too. Some, and a lot of our Native American brothers, Israelites, they did have urban centers and cities. Others were more so nomadic, and they call them, hunter-gatherers. So it depends, on where and which tribes and which localities that you're studying at. But for a surety, in North America, our Israelite brothers, much like they were doing back in Israel, in the land, they did have actual city centers where people gathered and, they worshiped and, they did community service stuff, no different than in a righteous sense, the stuff that we do in a community here, just with the mass more populace. Cahokia, that's one of the main ones. And also the other two, Mesa Verde and Chacao. Those two cities, major city hubs, are located in the southwest. So today, the southwest areas and those specific places, it's like New Mexico and Arizona, that area. Not exactly California, but think New Mexico and Arizona. That's where those two Native American cities were, to where, they came and gathered and lived in a larger community, more so than some of our nomadic brothers that, kind of lived in smaller tribes scattered throughout. So those are two notable cities within North America. And I have some, this is Cahokia. That is the picture on the left, that is actually one of the main pyramids, if you will, pyramids or mounds that's in North America along the Mississippi Basin. There's a number of them, and there's a number of types. I just chose pretty much the most notable and most noticeable one, which is in Cahokia itself. But there's a number of mounds. And then you have a picture right here on the right. This is an artist drawing a depiction pretty much of a pre-Columbian time. You see, our Native American brothers right here, brown skin, and you see these pyramid mounds, and you see houses or places of, worship, which oftentimes it was one of the two, on top of them. It's a similar motif as we're going to go as we go further into history and the other parts of the Americas, but pyramids. And we're going to get into actually what's the fascination with these pyramids in a little bit, but I just want to point that out. So that's in Cahokia, cityscape that we did. So it was a pretty big urban center. It's really large actually. I didn't put as many pictures as I could have, but you can go over there in Mississippi right now and see it for yourself, and you can look up some more. It's a lot. Now, in the southwest, we have on the right under Chacao, that's Chacao, and on the left, on the left Chacao, and on the right Mesa Verde. So these were pretty much, I don't want to say clay, but Adobe's houses made out of earth and clay, essentially. And these were community centers as well, too. Mesa Verde being probably, you can see actually the houses that the people were living in and design with the doors and everything like that. So that was a city center that our brothers actually made there in New Mexico, Arizona, that area over there. This one right here, Chacao, that's a really aerial view, but I believe like if you were to zoom in more, like each individual little spaces that you see, they would pretty much be like, I believe, individual houses or rooms too. And you kind of see like a courtyard right there in the middle for whatever community activities that were going on at the time, which is we'll get into later on too. So that's Chacao and Mesa Verde as far as cities in North America. And these are some pictures as far as our brothers that weren't necessarily in the big cities, but lived scattered in and throughout the plains and the woodlands, and as well as the Arctics of North America as well too. These are more so what our nomadic brothers were doing that decided not to live in the cities. They built, what we know as teepees in the Great Plains. They had more so straw housings in woodland areas like California, and as well as state-wise, I want to say like Ohio. You have more places like that you see on the top left and the bottom right. And to the more extreme, up in the Arctics of Canada, the subarctic and the Arctic, you have our Inuit brothers as far as they're called today, and our Eskimos that built in this right season they built igloos because they lived in a cold environment and they had to adapt. So when it was winter, they literally had to make igloos out of blocks of ice and maybe whatever else they had within the ice to keep them blocked, because I haven't really researched how they made it like that, but that's what they did. Obviously, when it was springtime and summer, there wasn't snow and stuff like that, so they did build more so, teepee, actual teepees. They used the skins of the animals to make housing as well too. But they didn't have really too much, of a major city sense like Chacao and Mesa Verde. So we had city dwelling, sedentary city dwelling Israelites in this time period, as well as the nomadic ones that moved around and followed the season or herds of animals for things. And you'll notice too that a lot of city dwelling Israelites, they tend to live by the water, because the water you can be able to grow crops and stuff like that, and whatever meats and animals come in, and then you could do trade. It just makes it a more urban center. All right, so next we're going to go over to Central America and Mesoamerica. And there's the main two civilizations within Mesoamerica, Central America, that people automatically come to think in their mind is the Aztecs and the Mayans. And the Aztecs primarily because the Aztecs was the last civilization that came up from other civilizations in Central America before the Spaniards came and conquered, and Moctezuma. That's where, if you ever heard the phrase Moctezuma's revenge, he was the last leader of the Aztec Empire during that time. But there was more. Well, we're getting to that right now. There was more before that. So dealing again on this part right here, as you can see on the map, the more eastern part of Central America where the Aztecs are. Before them, in order, I have right here, the oldest civilization recorded in this area, which actually had a kingdom that was far bigger than the Aztecs, was the Olmec. So a lot of us may have recognized the Olmec because of the stone heads that people have found. These are found in this particular area of Central America. That's where the Olmecs are from. After their civilization kind of, died down and went out, a new civilization came up called Teotihuacan. So they came up next, and then we keep going forth. The Zapotec, and then the Tarscan actually were rivals of the descendants of the Olmec and Teotihuacans, which were the Aztecs, but they were actually kind of separate. But they lived in the same area as well too. And then from Teotihuacan, we have the Toltecs, and then the Mexica, and then of course the Aztecs and the Mixtec and the Nahua. Those were all kingdoms that came either on top of each other or were surrounding each other. So if you ever look into the history, or if you just hear by ear, a lot of these kingdoms succeeded each other or were neighboring kingdoms around this time. So you can kind of look at the map on the right. You can see where Teotihuacan was centralized. You can see where I cut off the okay. You can see where the Olmec was mainly centralized, which is that yellow U. The Zapotec, which is that blue circle right at the bottom, and then the Toltec, which was that Pac-Man looking circle. That was their main localities as far as being before the Aztecs. The Aztecs was the last reigning major empire in Central America, on this part of Central America. After that, it's in the same general vicinity, but you're going to know that, people have a general distinctness between the Aztecs and then the Mayas. The Mayas lived over here on more so in the coastal area. I mean, the Gulf Coast, that's where the Mayans live. And the Mayans pretty much for the longest time, as far as the research that I have gathered, they consider themselves in this particular vicinity as Mayans throughout a long period of time. Now, granted, there are different, cityscapes within the area, but they all collectively refer to themselves as together as Mayans, as far as research in this aspect goes. So those are, and of course, there's more. There are more, because these are the main hubs and centers to where it was cities. These were where the main cities were the Mayans and the Aztecs. That was where the civilization, the urban hubs were. Now, you can't mistake that there were some nomadic tribes that were dwelling around over the area too. So now we're going to get into some of the pictures we got right here. So as far as we see again on the top, we see another pyramid. This pyramid is these are actually two pyramids within the Aztec Empire, which is the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. And then we have the Olmec heads right there with our Native American brother, and I chose that because there's a lot of confusion that usually goes on between in the internet community, saying the Olmecs were Southern Kingdom Israelites or they were Africans, because of the way that the stone heads might look. But when you kind of put a side-by-side feature, some Native Americans actually do represent and look like the Olmec heads, like this brother right here. There's some others, Some of them are described as having, the most notable thing that people say that the Olmecs were either Southern Kingdom Israelites or Africans was like have big lips. But you can see clearly this man right here has some pretty big ones on him right now too, and he matches on there. The second, that's an artist representation of a pre-Columbian time with the Mayans, and that was dwelling in Central America too. So just to let you know that these were city hubs, these were major urban centers. All right. So I want to touch briefly too. No, I'm going to touch on that after I go through these. So, yeah. South America. So South America, going into there, it's pretty much two parts that we can get through. It's the eastern half and the western half. The eastern half is where most notably people recognize in South America is the Incan Empire. You can see that along the lines right here on the map in the purple. The Inca Empire pretty much spanned from in the purple even all the way going into Central America as well too. But aside from that, there were our native and indigenous Israelite brothers that did live in the Amazon forest before pre-Columbian and as well as the Amazon basin. Some of these civilizations were Andean before they were collectively called the Inca. You can look it up: the Valdivia, the Corral, the Chavin, the Nazca, Mochi, Cachopoya, Wari, Tiwanaku, the Inca, of course, and the Muisca. You can look up those tribes, and as we're going to get, those tribes actually are what we have referenced in book references as to why they were seen as being the 10 tribes of Israel. So let me get you guys a book actually by a brother, not a brother, a person that was fluent in the language and considered himself a Jew. His name is Antonio Montesinos, and as well as Manasseh ben Israel. They wrote a book. That's called The Hope of Israel, and it was actually by Manasseh ben Israel, and he was inspired by a man named Antonio Montesinos. And in this book, it goes over reasons and stipulations as to why Israelites in North, Central, and South America were Israelites, and they were dealing particularly with some pre-Peruvian features, dealing with the Nazca, the Mochi, the Cachapoya, and Muisca. They were dealing with the tribes that were over there. So if we get to the Hope of Israel and Antonio Montesinos' book, and we get to, I believe it would be called Section 5. No, Section 6. And we're going to read off some things as far as facts that they found. And I'm going to hand you the phone right now, Yashamai, to do so. Let me find the exact. Where I want you to get at. Okay. Excuse me, section 6 actually. You can start from pretty much right there, that the Indians borrowed those of the Hebrews. It's right there. Well, above that. So the book is A Hope for Israel.
It says that the Indians borrowed those of the Hebrews who lived among them before or after they went to the unknown mountains. The Indians of Yucatan and the Acusatanes do circumcise themselves. The Tatones of New Spain and Mexicans, as Roman and Gomaza in the general history of the Indians testify, rend their garments if there happen any sudden misfortune or death of any.
Okay, hold on right there. So when we go through these, a lot of these books, they have a general, pretty much what they bring out is the customs of Israelites. So as you read through the scriptures, you find that circumcision was an Israelite custom. We were a nation that was commanded to do that as far as keeping our covenant with the Most High. The brother just right now, the rending of clothes, pretty much renting clothes, ripping up your clothes when something bad happens, as far as, mourning. That was a custom that you find out a lot. And as far as dealing with the kings, we read into certain prophets. When you rent your clothes, it's a form of humbling yourself. And those were customs again that our people in North America they kept throughout. I believe there's a couple more.
It says, Gregorius Gracius and Monarchia and Isle of Peru said that the Guanacapicus, hearing that his son fled for fear of the army of his enemy, he rent his garments. The Mexicans and Tatones, or the Tatone Cazenines, kept continually fire upon their altars, as God commands in Leviticus. Those of Peru do the same in their temples dedicated to the sun.
Check that out right there. So that's another important thing, a continual fire. The menorah, as far as being in the Holy of Holies, that was an ordinance that the Most High kept told us to do. And actually, you know what? We could probably get that right now in the book of Leviticus, since it mentioned. It's an incense. Exodus about the ordinances of in the tabernacle about the fire. I think it's towards the end of Exodus. Just the construction of the altars. Right now, Exodus chapter 30 and verse 1.
The book of Exodus, chapter 30 and verse 1. And thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon it. Of shittim wood shalt thou make it.
So that was one of the components that we had within the temple. But again, the reference was talking about just our native brothers having continual fire burning in a holy place. Now, that's in Antonio Montezino's and Manasseh ben Israel's account. Another source, which I should have touched on again too, when we were covering North America, is a man named James Adair. Much like Manasseh ben Israel, he was also an anthropologist that studied some of the ways and the customs of Israelites that were in North America. His particular ones was what we were talking about earlier around the area of Cahokia, with the North American Indians, particularly the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and three of the other what's called the five civilized tribes. But he particularly dealt with the Chickasaw and the Choctaw because he was a trader. And this James Adair, a European Edomite, he was well versed in Hebrew customs and knowledge, and as well as the language. And we can get right now, as far as a similar thing about with the fire, what James Adair noticed. Pardon me for the delay. These are some pretty big books, a lot of highlights, and a lot of things to get. Yeah, some sticky notes for sure, for real, to get lost in. But it is highlighted, so I will catch it. Yes, sir. There we go, right here. This is from chapter in the James Adair account. I'll get you the chapter in a second. But you can start from there in the highlight.
I just read down.
Okay. Yeah.
It says, neither would they willfully extinguish their old fire before the annual sacrifices offered up, if like the former heathens, they paid religious worship to the elementary fire. For no society of people would kill their own gods unless the papists who go farther even to eat him. The Indians esteem the old year's fire as a most dangerous pollution, regarding only the supposed holy fire, which the Archimagnus annually renews for the people. They pay no religious worship to stocks or stones, after the manner of the old Eastern pagans, neither do they worship any kind of images whatsoever.
Okay, so that's dealing again with a continual fire on both accounts within the Peruvian Indians, Native Americans, Israelites, and as well as the Cahokia dwelling. And you know what? We have that precept, and we could thank our brother online in Leviticus chapter 6 and verse 13.
The book of Leviticus chapter 6 and verse 13. The fire shall ever be burning upon the altar, it shall never go out.
So that's two, those are the proof of customs that Manasseh ben Israel and James Adair found out about our people living in North America. They were keeping the commandments to the best of our abilities. So we're gonna go on, and you know what? I'm actually gonna go into some of the things, the mound building. So we can go on the PowerPoint. I'm gonna briefly run through them, but I'm gonna talk about what also ties in our brothers being Israelites as far as our righteousness' sake and as where our shortcomings actually come in. So this is dealing more so with the Amazon forest basin. Their two major groups will be the Marajorara and the Cambeba, as far as what they were called pre-Columbian. So interesting thing, before Columbus came, our people not only lived in South America, just in the Incan Empire, Cusco, and the Andes Mountains, but we were living in the forest as well too, in cities, not as it is today. If you see a lot of the pictures today of our people in the Amazon forest, we're looking kind of raggedy and tagged up. But before then, we actually had an organized community before genocide and disease made us flee more into the deeper parts of the jungle of the Amazon, and then we kind of lost our customs even further. But before then, we had, as we can see in the pictures right here, if you guys look to the bottom right, these are geoglyphs on the floors of the Amazon forest that were recently burnt down. And these were discovered, and these were actually said to be city centers, no different than a community center that we found in Cahokia, Tenochtitlan, and in the Aztec Empire, and as well as Mesa Verde and Costa, the Cahokia. I get a little messed up with the words, but wherever we were in our environment, we had found out a way to either become nomadic or dwell in urban centers. As far as the Incas, right here, you see the temple of Machu Picchu, the city rather, and the temple that sits on top of it. That's over there too, and as well as the pyramids that are in the Amazon basin as well too, the forest. They built mounds over there too, our people living on that part. So we had similar customs of building these pyramid mounds all throughout Central and South America. But let's get into that, the reason why we did these things. So we could take the PowerPoint off of that. The reason, the big reason, and almost essentially the overhype of what we see with Native American history and with these pyramids found all throughout, it comes from more so actually some of the worst parts of our Israelite history and things that we were doing to actually anger the Most High God. We can get to the book of 1 Kings, chapter 12 and verse 31. And we're going to actually touch on a little bit of what Solomon's influence was and, how that left it over an imprint onto all of our people, but then, a lot in particular on our 10-tribe Native American brothers. So 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 31.
1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 31. And he made an house of high places and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th. I'm sorry, just.
Yeah, that was actually doing Jeroboam, but 1 Kings chapter 3 and 2. That's Solomon. We're going to start with then, and then we're going to get to that scripture.
3 and 2.
My bad.
You said 3 and 2?
Yes, sir.
1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 2. Only the people sacrificed in high places, because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days.
And verse 3.
And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places.
So the scriptures mentions a lot. We're going to find out right now these particular high places. What these high places were, they were, however they were constructed, there were a number of things, but they were essentially places that our people built that were really high above, ground level. And then that's where we did things where we either on both ends, where we worship the Most High, even though that wasn't necessarily what he wanted us to do and how he wanted to do it, or on the flip end, worshiping other gods. Solomon was one of the ones that first allowed all of Israel to sin by that, but the northern kingdom, took it to another level. They took the high places to another level with that, and we can get 1 Kings 12 and 31 now.
First Kings chapter 12 verse 31. And he made an house of high places and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi.
So this is dealing with Jeroboam. Throughout Jeroboam and then all of the leaders of the northern kingdom from there on, one of the main issues was that got them kicked out of the land was everything that came associated with idolatry. And part of that was we learned these things from not only Egypt, but a lot of the other surrounding nations as well, too. We built high places, and then we did either between the customs and the ordinances of what those gods required, or we were just completely disobedient to what the Most High wanted, and we built a high place anyway, thinking that the Most High would accept that we know he would offer, or he would rather receive our offerings and our sacrifices upon these things. But the Most High said, after Solomon had built a temple, that was the only place, that was going to be the only high place where the temple of, our temple, which was on Mount Zion, where we would go to worship the Most High. We can get that in Isaiah 2 and 3.
Book of Isaiah, chapter 2. Book of Isaiah, chapter 2, and verse 3. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
So that was the way the Most High intended it. That was the mountain of Zion, which is constantly referenced in symbolic and in its literal sense. That's where we were supposed to go to worship the Most High God. We were not supposed to be making high places of our own, or even to think no different than Nadab and Abihu putting profane incenses before the Most High. We weren't supposed to make our own high places and worship the Most High there. He had a designated spot that he had for us, but our people, being hard-headed, decided to go against that and do one of the two others: literally directly worship other gods, or try to worship Most High Yahweh, regardless, even though that's what he said not to do. And there's and that's pretty much the relation between why you see in the Americas so many pyramids. It's a custom when we were trying our hardest, and when we read throughout books like James Adair's accounts as well as Antonio Montezino's, yes, there were appointed times to where we were worshiping the Most High God, but the issue was we tried to do the commandments to the best of what we knew. We were still in a lot of those old practices. That's why you have pyramids all throughout the Americas. It was a habit that could not get let go of, regardless of devoting it to the Most High. But it just wasn't, it wasn't what the Most High required as far as in the law. But we didn't have the book. Our brothers did not have the book of the law during these time periods. So it wasn't correct. It wasn't correct to do so, as well as the idolatry that comes along with it too. So those things were happening in a lot of the major cities, specifically dealing with the Incas. Some of probably depending on the time period between the Olmecs and the Aztecs and the Mayans. Yes, there is evidence that we were, at the time, we acknowledged that the Most High and the Great Spirit existed, but at the same time too, we were also acknowledging other gods and their customs as well, in these places as well too. And that again goes with our history. We can get I think 2 Chronicles 28, 2 through 4. Yeah, 2 Chronicles 28, 2 through 4.
I'm gonna try to look for this source that I have, but kind of like what you was exactly saying. Our people didn't have the full word and the full understanding at that time, and even like when you deal with the Aztec ruler Montezuma, right? Yeah. There was there's some articles where Hernan Cortez, one of the conquistadors, was documenting the conversations he was having with him and sending it back to the king and the queen. And in this conversation, he told Hernan, like, yeah, we're not, the aboriginals of this land. We came here a long time ago, and over a great time period, I'm sure we fell off from the way that we were supposed to be doing, because he was questioning him about the idolatry and, because they was pushing Catholicism and everything like that. And he was like, you're not supposed to be doing this. And he's like, look, we know we Israel, and we probably didn't fell off.
Yeah. That's great. I wish I had found that source. We can definitely get that for anybody who wants to visit the church. We'll definitely hand that to you.
You said 2 Chronicles?
Yeah, 2 Chronicles 28, 2 through 4.
28.
Yep.
The book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 28, verse 2. For he walked in the ways of the king of Israel and made also molten images for Baalam. So the aspect of idolatry, particularly dealing with the Incas and the Temple of the Sun. For a surety, there was idolatry going on there. Now, whether the sun that they used to represent the Most High, because our people understood that fire was a trait and attribute of the Most High, and that's documented in both James Adair's book and what we read in Antonio Montezino's, and just the customs. But the first commandment says that thou shalt not make any images alongside of me, or even the second commandment. I'm sorry. The second commandment says, "Thou shalt not bow down any images or make any representative images of things that are in heaven alongside the Most High." So even if our people thought that what they were doing were right as far as representing Yahweh with these images, that still was not the full completeness of what the law of the Most High said. So that eventually, ended up being idolatry. Now, when we're dealing with
in the high places of the Incan Empire, and you can definitively confirm that they were, there was idolatry involved around that area. You can continue.
Verse 3, moreover, he burnt incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burnt his children in the fire, after the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel.
So that's another thing going through in and throughout North, Central, South America is the aspect of human sacrifices. Now, I'm not going to say that these things happen maybe as often or periodically as a sensationalist probably might say, but they did happen because our people were known to have done that in our failed state of mind. We were practicing those customs in the high places and in the groves under evergreen tree, and one of those things being human sacrifices. And you may have a lot of European scholars and writers that over exaggerate that, but it doesn't neglect the fact that our people were involved in that, and that's still not correct.
And I did find it.
Okay, good.
So this is from the second letter of Hernan Cortez to Charles V.
Please read that.
It says, I said everything to them that I could to divert them from their idolatries and draw them to a knowledge of God our Lord. Moctezuma replied, the others assenting to what he said, that they had already informed me that they were not the aborigines of the country, but that their ancestors had immigrated to it many years ago, and they fully believed that after so long an absence from their native land, they might have fallen into some errors. So, like you were saying, they understood that they had came to that land many, many years ago, and they did fall into some errors. They weren't following the proper way to serve the Most High. Just like Paul had said in the book of Romans, I bear them witness that they got a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge.
Not according to knowledge. Yep. And as far as the 10 tribes go, old habits die hard, and history seems to repeat itself. And we find some of the things that was going on in the Book of Kings and Chronicles that was going on again, which is it's not the best way to prove, but it does prove that these were our hard-headed is not even probably the right word, but these were our hard-headed people living over here in America, being wicked, to different degrees. You can finish that, I believe, at verse 4.
Khan. He sacrificed also and burnt incense in the high places and on the hills and under every green tree.
Right. And green trees, not to get too much into detail with that, but when it talks about the green trees and the groves in the scriptures, it's talking about in the land, Ashtoreth poles, which is basically fertility worship, and that deals with all the unlawful things that come with, sexual immorality. So that was happening in Israel in the land. And dealing again, some research I found with the Incas, there has been some, and even just pottery too, when you look at it in some of the major urban cities, there's a lot of overtly, sexual imagery that goes on with some of these pottery pieces. So that can be assumed that was going on too. The same thing with the groves, the fertility rites, as far as, supposed worship to a side to Yahweh, another God. Those things were, those were happening too during these times. And it makes sense, that a lot of the urban centers would more so do that, because when a collective or people are usually together and not doing right, that's when things kind of just spread as a virus. As far as sin. So those are some, that's what I wanted to point out more so with the reason behind the pyramids that you find all throughout the Americas. As great as they are and as fascinating they are, and it's like, our people were really talented and skilled to do that. Yeah, we were doing that in Egypt. We did that in Egypt for the Egyptians. We were also doing that in our own land too, without the needing to do that. As a matter of fact, we can actually get that directly in the law to where it says we're not supposed to do that. Exodus 20, verse 24 through 26. So this is part of the law that our people weren't necessarily understanding about this.
Exodus chapter 20 and verse 24. An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings, and thy peace offerings, thy sheep and thine oxen. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee.
That was it.
25 too?
Yeah, through 26. Well,
And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone, for if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it.
yeah.
Neither shalt thou go up by steps unto my altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon.
So the two things with that is, at one point in time in our history, that law kind of got nullified because once the actual temple was built that Solomon commanded, that was the pretty much that was the altar, that was even the high place in righteousness toward the Most High. That's what we had. So from there, we weren't supposed to have any more high places to do obeisance and worship to the Most High. We went to Jerusalem. We went to Zion. Now, oh yeah, of course, most definitely.
Just something else from those letters, because and it's really good too to have in your arsenal. I'm gonna shoot it to you afterwards because it's a primary source. You know, it's not like he said, she said. This is exactly what he was recording and sending back, you know, to the powers that be back in Spain. So it says, among these temples, there is one which far surpasses all the rest. Because like you were saying, you know, we did a whole bunch of beautiful work, but it was being used for the wrong reasons, right?
Right.
So he says, among these temples, there was one that surpassed all the rest, whose grandeur of architectural details no human tongue is able to describe. For within its precincts, surrounded by a lofty wall, there is a room enough for a town of 500 families. Around the interior and the enclosure, there are handsome edifices containing large halls and corridors in which the religious persons attached to the temple reside. So it's like they had the priests living inside these temples, right? It says, there are full 40 towers which are lofty and well built, the largest of which has 50 steps leading to its main body, and is higher than the tower of the principal tower of the church. The stone and wood of which they are constructed are so well wrought in every part that nothing could be better done. For the interior of the chapels containing the idols consist of curious imagery wrought in stone with plaster ceilings and woodwork carved in relief, and painted with figures of monsters and other objects. All these towers are the burial places of the nobles, and in every chapel in them is dedicated to a particular idol to which they pay their devotions.
There you have it. What was going on in these temples, and the reasons to why these temples were constructed. But the main thing too was the Most High said, if you're going to make me an altar, back then, you're not supposed to have steps upon it. You see a lot of steps in Machu Picchu. You see a lot of steps in the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon in Mexico, dealing with the Aztecs. You see a lot of steps with the pyramids in the Mayan Empire, well too. You even see the steps in Cahokia in North America with the mounds, even though they were made of dirt and earth layered upon each other. The image that's shown, there was steps. So that was a precept that our people missed the mark on. The Most High said, I don't want y'all to be doing stuff like that. But as beautiful as it is, we got to just remember in the law, we weren't supposed to be doing that. And that's what our people, we're doing over here in the time, no different than what they were doing when they were in the land incorrectly. So again, old habits tend to die hard when you try to change without the knowledge of the law. Let me see if we can get back to the PowerPoint. So that's with the pyramids and the temples. Another thing that I have too, as far as just actually on a positive note, actually too, this is something that's recorded in North America. The name of the Most High. The name of the Most High was definitely confirmed and to be known by our people by James Adair, which is again, one of our primary sources dealing with North American Israelites, but Israelites are Israelites, Israel in all America. Right now, I'm going to get the name of the Most High, the dialect. Check this out. Got this one right here, and on this one, and this page right here. All right, so prefacing this, the language spoken of over all of our people, it was different dialects of the same language way back then, before pre-Columbian, before pre-Columbian. Generally, all the trade that was going down between the continents of America, our brothers could understand each other. No different than, Spanish spoken in Los Angeles is spoken different in Puerto Rico or New York or even Texas. But it's still Spanish, but it's just like you got its own flair and its spice to it. But the general constructs are the same. That's the same thing with these different dialects of Hebrew that our people were speaking all throughout the Americas. So we're going to get this from James Adair.
It says, by a strict permanent divine precept, the Hebrew nation were ordered to worship at Jerusalem, Jehovah, the true name of the living God, and who by the Indians is styled Yehovah, which the 72 interpreters, either from ignorance or superstition, have translated Adonai.
So our Native American brothers, they had different ways of saying it, but Yahuwah, that was one of the ways that our people called the name of the Most High. It's very similar to Yahweh, as far as we go back from the Paleo Hebrew translations that we use today. Yahweh, 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 Yah, Jah. It all has a cornerstone pretty much as far as the way it sounded. And you can read the second one too.
It says, yet though the Indian Americans have the supposed cherubimbissal figures in their Sanhedrin, and though a strong religious principle, dance there perhaps every winter's night, always in a bowing posture, and frequently sing Hallelujah Yahweh.
So you see what that's talking about is, what they may call today powwows. The powwows that were going on back then, when they would come out for a feast or a festival, a new moon even, and that's a whole nother thing. We're on one thing right now. When they came out to these gatherings and they dance, they would chant out the name of the Most High. They would say Hallelu Yohewa. So, and they would be praising the Most High during these feasts to do so. And this is the account from the North American Indians. And I wish I had, some deeper accounts as far as in South America and Central America. But this is proof enough. James Adair is a definite primary source. If anybody can get their hands on his writing, his books, he has a lot of information that I haven't even necessarily covered all through myself. I've gotten some of the main points, but it's documented. Our people knew the name of the Most High, so that's another confirmation that we knew what we were doing to a degree over here in the Americas. On the reverse flip side too, we did as far as people in today's world, since the 1960s and on, they like to associate particularly North American Indians with with a peyote religion or mushrooms and stuff like that. Pretty much those different plants that give you psychedelic highs. So those were things that our people actually did do too, and they were also doing in the land. The scriptures say that those are enchantments, and we're not supposed to do that. They were called, we call them, as far as priests or medicine men, that the word would be shamans. So throughout different nomadic tribes, those people, those seers, those more spiritual people, they did exist. But what they were doing, when you look up, history, both modern and pre-Columbian, that wasn't a custom that we weren't supposed to do. So that was an aspect of sin that we actually did get in. So, when you go and look up Native American history, don't think that the aspect of, the peyote Turk taking visionary quest, that wasn't something the Most High wanted us to do. That's a form of witchcraft. That's wizardry. It's an enchantment. We're not supposed to be doing those things. Our people weren't supposed to be doing those things. But old habits tend to die hard, without the law. That's what we were doing as well, too. Some more we have right here. As far as clothing types, I don't know if you guys can see it, but a lot of our people were wearing fringes. This is a clothing sample of some North American brothers. They were wearing fringes on their clothes. We even have some archaeology, some bas reliefs rather. This is a brother from the Mayan Empire. If you can kind of see, which you probably can't, on the bottom of his clothes right there, you see a fancy type of fringe, but a fringe nonetheless. They're like beads. There are beads on the end. We're going to get a quick zoom in right now. So that was, as we know, wearing fringes is a law, and our people were keeping that. So, up in a pot and bravo. You guys can see that? Those are fringes. This is a Mayan engraving at the bottom of his. He's wearing pants, I believe, because you can kind of see the detail. But yeah, those are fringes on there, and our people definitely kept that, whether it was through beads and different rocks and stuff like that strung together, or if it was, a more earthly substance like when we're dealing more so in the Amazon, made of grass or such. It was they were still dealing with fringes. Our people still definitely knew the concept of having fringes on our clothing for a time, So that's a more visible custom to see with our Native American brothers keeping our Israelite traditions, if you so choose to look into that history. We got another thing right here too, another source in Cusco, in Cusco and Peru. You can read this real quick you can read from right there. Another custom that our brothers were keeping to more so modern day, but this is, our people regard this. This is something that we do today that the Most High commands us. We could find in the New Testament, but throughout our history.
The Indian praying place above Cusco. This road is one of the principal highways in Peru, and hundreds of Indians pass up and down, going in and out of Cusco daily. The view of Cusco lying below in the Green Valley is truly a beautiful one, but it is something more than a sense of beauty that makes the Indians stop and with uncovered heads, some kneeling and some standing, offer a prayer as they look toward their Mecca.
So that is a custom of our people. When we, as far as the men, when we pray and when we prophesy, we have our heads uncovered. We're not supposed to have anything over our heads. We can get that in. Do you know that precept?
1 Corinthians.
My brother, 1 Corinthians. Get that, please. Oh, shoot, it's right. 1 Corinthians 11:4.
Book of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 4. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoreth his head.
So that was something that our people passed down and knew. When they were praying in Peru, at the temple in Cusco, which is like the high point, like, shouldn't have to explain myself, but the temple in Cusco was essentially like the Jerusalem over here, incorrectly. But when they did do that, they had their heads uncovered. And whether it was both the men or the women, we know it to be true that the men mainly were supposed to have their heads uncovered while making these prayers to the Most High God. So the customs of our people, when you look for them, they're found all throughout, confirming that for sure. If you need the confirmation that this is us, and these are the things that we were doing. This is just how we lived in North America, trying to get things right. North, Central, and South America, trying to get things right. Yeah, let me go to the.
It's crazy though, because they would discourage us from believing that the natives, are Israelites, given all the history and the similarities, but will force you to believe that white people are the real Jews, and their history don't consist of none of this.
Like And they're the ones documenting it. They be the main ones documenting this, and then still be like, but it was us. It's like, all right. I can't wait till we get a lesson of as far as a similar sense of dealing with the Southern Kingdom in West Africa. It's a lot of same similarities as far as not getting things right, but having things right at the same time too. When we got kicked out of Jerusalem, our Southern Kingdom in. But yeah, if we can get back to the slide. So, along with the references that Yashimai brought out, and some of the other little side ones, picked up from libraries and stuff, these are three, but not everything. These are some of the three main references that I use today. Other than Ethan Smith, I did not actually talk about him too much. I can get into him a little bit. To look into James Adair's History of the American Indians, Manasseh ben Israel's The Hope of Israel. Those are two primary old resources, like from the 16 and 1700s, as far as when Europeans were definitely pushing that the 10 tribes of Israel were living in the Americas. So those are some good primary sources. And I'm going to talk a little bit on Ethan Smith as far as it deals with the Mormon religion. So just briefly, Ethan Smith wrote a book called View of the Hebrews while he was living in, the Mississippi, St. Louis area in the 1700s or the 1800s. He wrote a book called View of the Hebrews. And that book, proving and documenting that Native Americans were Israel, actually inspired a man named Joseph Smith. Now, I can't say they're related, but his last name Smith as well, too. That inspired Joseph Smith to write and, deal falsely in creating the Church of Latter-day Saints and the Book of Mormon. He takes it only makes sense, even though he claims it doesn't. But he came up with the Book of Mormon literally 7 or 9 years after Ethan Smith came up with that book. And they both lived in the same state and, in the American colonies at that time. So it's, as far as time constraints go, it's pretty easy to tell who was getting or who was biting off of who. But, the Book of Mormon and the Latter-day Saint religion, they themselves acknowledge that, Native Americans are the lost tribes of Israel, but they just put a whole complete different mythological spin as far as, the history and how all that goes, and then, getting our people lost within that, while at the same time telling a little bit of the truth, but what's the devil for you, right? That's what he's for. Huh? I got this from a library in Huntington Park. I borrowed it indefinitely. Oh, yeah, it's pretty cheap. I mean, some books be like $800, but that's expensive too. Yeah, it's a pretty rare book. Like, I don't see many people knowing about it, but it's, if you want it, you can definitely get it. But there's a whole lot of information, and like James Adair, as far as he's a primary source, and he actually lists some of his sources in the inner ledgers of that he has. So anybody that wants to come to True Nation and look that up, come do that. I'm about to share that with my brother after the lesson. Yeah, but those three sources. And if you needed any more proof, but we'll just go over it through the PowerPoint. We have the Chief Joseph tablet, and we have the Bat Creek stone. Chief Joseph tablet has a Syrian cuneiform on there. How is Assyrian writing getting over into North America, other than the fact that Native Americans came over here from across the sea? I'll let you do your research on that. The Bat Creek stone, which has Paleo-Hebrew writing on it. I mean, are people speaking a dialect of Hebrew and writing in it? It kind of proves the fact that our people were Israel. So you have those two archaeological references. These two things too. The one on the right, a new moon ceremony. Now this is more so modern day, but it's well noted, in films and history and anthropology that our people kept the months of the year by the moons. Every time it was a new moon, it was a new month. So our people knew that, and that's a source right there. You can see on the top left, this is a This is a modern thing, but you see the name of the Most High right there, Yo Hey Wah, Friends Always Nation. So this is kind of like a Girl Scout organization, and that's what they call themselves. But the name of the Most High in its dialect is literally right there in front of your face, Yahweh, Yo Hey Wah. That's from our people. And then on the bottom right there, you have the Los Lunas Decalogue Stone, which is in New Mexico, which is what we talked about earlier, where Costa Verde and Chuco, those were those two major cities. That's where this stone was found, over there. So it makes sense that it would be around that area as well too. Yeah, that's all I have on my slides. But all those things to say, and pre-Columbian America, what our people were doing and what our people were pretty much up to. We were, we knew who we were. There's no doubt about that. We knew who we were. Over the period of time, again, that's over 2,000 years, 2,200 years to be exact, from being kicked out until Columbus and all the Europeans came in. That's a lot of time to have wanted to get things right, and then at the same time to, kind of fall back and digress, fluctuate. And ultimately, fulfilling prophecy that the Most High, he would gather us from this place, America, regardless in any way, so that we can learn the commandments and the laws in its complete. And we could get that actually right now in Jeremiah 31, verse 6 through 9. Jeremiah 31. Yep. You start from verse 6 and go through verse 9.
The book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 6. For there shall be a day that the watchmen upon the Mount Ephraim shall cry, Arise ye, and let us go up to Zion unto the Lord our God. For thus saith the Lord God, Sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Publish ye, praise ye, and say, O Lord, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and her that travaileth with child together. A great company shall return thither. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am the father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn.
So that is the prophecy dealing with the regathering of the 10 tribes of Israel away from this land, which we're still living in right now to this day, until we eventually make our way back in our soon-to-be future to our actual home, which is Jerusalem. But that's the things that we were doing in early history of America, pre-Columbian times. And with that, I want to say shalom.